Welcome to Just Break Up, the Patreon edition. My name is Sierra DeMulder.
And I'm Sam Blackwell. And today we're going to talk about gender and sexuality. My two favorite things.
Really?
I don't know.
This is kind of like a last hurrah Pride-ish episode.
Yep.
Because we haven't really talked about Pride because we did a bunch of recording before June so that we could go on vacations subsequently. And then then look at us now, recording it now.
Yeah, here we are.
I think this is airing in like the last Wednesday of June. But happy Pride, happy belated Pride, if you are listening to this or have already celebrated. Sam, did you celebrate Pride this year?
I did, yeah. Minneapolis has a very big Pride with a big parade and also like a thing in the park with lots of people milling about, which is like Midwesterners' favorite thing to do is like go to a place and just walk around with other people. Yeah, absolutely. So that's a big thing. So definitely did some Pride celebrating, which was really great. What about you?
Yeah, we Albany just had their Pride, this past weekend. Since we're recording this in advance. And the best part was it was my daughter's first Pride as a somewhat conscious being.
Sure.
Last year she was like 6 weeks old and she was in 2 months old, and she was in like a sling and just slept the whole time. And this time she like totally got it. I thought she was going to be overstimulated like her mother. But she like loved the loud noises and she loved all the colors and she was like totally drawn to it. And she got, somebody handed her a little rainbow pride flag and she was like, everybody was like, yeah, happy Pride, equality. And my daughter's just like frantically waving the flag, yelling, bubbles, because that's one of her 20 words or whatever. And there was bubbles in the parade and she was yelling with like such fervor and so she got into the spirit is what I'm trying to say.
That's great. We've officially indoctrinated her, so
yes, exactly. She's into the gay agenda, which is just angrily yelling about bubbles.
Yeah.
Another thing that she's really obsessed with right now because of Pride Parade is Mardi Gras beads.
Sure.
She's like, she wants to play with them. She wants to count them. She wants to wear them. She wants to put them on me. She wants to put them on our dog. Like, she's just really into those Mardi Gras beads. So,
I mean, they're fun.
What I'm trying to say is I'm raising a heathen. Yeah. Jokes aside, I had lots of feelings about Pride this year because of the just wild amount of anti-queer and trans legislation happening in the U.S. And, even like I said, we went on vacation in May. Me and my queer family, I felt so uneasy leaving our little safe bubble, you know what I mean? To travel to a different state. And so, yes, just putting out a very multifaceted, nuanced, happy Pride to those out there because it is love, and also
also the hate is real. So
yes, exactly, yeah. It is all of those things at once. So
absolutely, and I think it is. I think it's hard to. I feel like when I came out in junior year of high school, it was like in a very different time. It was like George W. Bush was president, right? Like there was no idea that like
don't
anything,
ask, don't tell.
Absolutely, like anything could possibly change around queer people, and especially trans people. And then saw sort of like a really big sort of push towards rights in like a lot of different directions. Not necessarily true for trans people, to be clear, but like it definitely feels like this is a backlash, and I think it's been this Pride especially, like there's just been I had a lot of fear of my own safety as well, right? Like it's not just like, oh, I feel psychologically unsafe because somebody's going to yell at me. Like very much like a bodily fear of actual harm happening.
Yes.
Which is like a really, I guess I've been privileged to not have to worry about that in the same way that other folks have. But like in this year, it was like, oh man, if I go into this space with like all of these other queer people, it's like someone just gonna like blow us up or like shoot us or something. And like, so just to say to folks that are experiencing similar levels of like fear, I think it's really real. Like this feels very unprecedented and it feels really intentional. Like the amount of hate and fear that's being stoked around queer people and especially trans folks is really real. Where like our identities, our bodies are being used as like political tokens and that puts us in like really active danger. So for folks who like are celebrating, great. If folks are scared to, also totally understand that. If folks aren't out and can't do it, like I get all of that, but just know that Sierra and I are sitting here in solidarity with all of our queer and trans listeners, and we love you all very deeply, no matter what your engagement with Pride looks like.
Yeah, totally. You said that perfectly. Yeah. Do you want to get into this letter, which is Pride in Pride alignment?
Right? Absolutely.
Yeah, it is.
Speaking of questioning everything about ourselves, this letter comes from Questioning, whose pronouns are she, her, and they, them, who is writing from the void. Hi, Sam and Sierra. Your podcast has carried me through so many ups and downs. So after many years of listening, I am writing to you with a question, or rather many questions, about queerness. I am 24 years old, and for a long time, I identified as a straight cis woman. But over the past 2 years, I have been questioning my gender and sexuality. I have been using she, they pronouns, and when my friends use they, them pronouns to refer to me, it feels freeing. I don't feel boxed into the category of woman. I feel seen as just a human or a blob of atoms. Listening to JBU episode 244, Swimming Against the Undercurrent of Gender, actually meant so much to me. It made me see a possibility of parenthood for me outside of motherhood.
Oh, the Malou episode.
And I don't even know if I want to have kids. The episode just made me see the real possibility of living and flourishing as a non-binary person. I feel like I could go on with life using she, her pronouns and identifying as a woman who dresses in the ways that are feminine and masculine. I could redefine woman to mean whatever I want it to be. But that also feels hard given all that is associated with being a woman that I don't necessarily connect with. I love femininity and masculinity and all that is in between and beyond, and I want to embrace all of it. And so I feel a freedom with using they, them pronouns. As for sexuality, growing up, I honestly wasn't sure whether I could feel sexual or romantic attraction to anyone. And then I got into a relationship with a guy for 2 years and did develop sexual and romantic attraction to him. One of the reasons that I broke up with him was my desire to explore other relationships and my sexuality. Since then, I think I've had crushes on women, but I'm also not sure if these are crushes or me liking them as a friend. I frankly feel insecure about saying that I'm queer or bi because I haven't been physically intimate with a woman. I know that I don't need that to validate queerness, but I also feel uncertain about my queerness. For both gender and sexuality, I don't think I truly considered a possibility different from being a cis straight woman until around 2 years ago. I'm trying to be okay with the uncertainty, but I would really love to hear any of your thoughts on this. Some of the questions in my head are, am I queer enough? Will I just one day know if I'm non-binary or bi or queer? I feel queer in many ways, but I'm also afraid of using that word since I'm still uncertain and questioning. When did you know you were queer? How did you navigate the stages of uncertainty and questioning? With love, Questioning.
This is such a good letter. Yeah. Where do we want to start? Pick one of those questions. Well, let me start by saying, oh my God, I love you so much, letter writer.
Perfect.
My bad. I was like off my affirmation train for a second.
Get back on it.
You are asking all of the right questions, and at the same time, I can see how you are getting so tangled up in those questions of self-discovery and self-reclamation. And I just want to say that you're here, and whatever you are, label or not, experience or not, surety or not, is real and valid. You are a real person. That's what I wish somebody said to me when I spent years questioning my queerness and wondering if I was just taking up space in that word. You're real. You are real. And you don't need to have like a stamped passport of queerness to validate your experience and yourself and your heart. Listen, you sound pretty queer to me. And honestly, it has nothing to do with crushes. It has everything to do with a rejection of gender norms, with an interest and curiosity and an inner pull towards non-heterosexual or non-hetero presenting relationships in whatever way that is, right? Because we know that there can be, heterosexual queer relationships, of all different creations. This is a word for you. If you want it, it's yours. And at the same time, it's just a word. I think I would also add, I think I craved so long for a perfect word. Bisexual didn't feel quite right because it felt too binary and it felt too trivialized by the queer community. And gay didn't feel right. Straight didn't feel right. Queer, I wasn't really comfortable using the word queer until the last 5 years, maybe, where I was like, oh, I see that it's not necessarily a catch-all, but it's a, no, it just feels real to me. Like if I separate from my wife and I go have sex with someone who was assigned male at birth and identifies as a male, I'm still going to be queer. My heart's queer. You know what I mean? The way I love
queer
is
heart
queer.
It's just like a rainbow,
The way I address the world is queer, right? It doesn't have anything to do with the genitals or the type of sex I'm having, So it's just a word. It's what I'm finishing that thought is that it's your word. It's our word. It's such an empowering word. And then also words have their limitations because they cannot contain the expansiveness and the nuance and the magic of the human experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And if the word queer if the word queer doesn't feel quite right to you right now,
I've got a lot of queelings.
Yes, queer feelings. I am filled to the brim with them. If that word doesn't feel quite right for you yet, you don't have to use it, right? You can say, I'm questioning right now. You could say, I'm uncertain right now. You could say, all of those things is okay. And I think that there
adjacent.
is. Yeah, absolutely. I think that there definitely is a stigma in the queer community about people who are not sure or just kind of dipping their toe in, right? But my experience is that I've never actually experienced that. I've never been around people who are I'm going to this gay bar to dip my toe in and then see how it goes. It's no, eventually they understand that they are bisexual or have attractions. There's a lot of I have seen people come into their understanding of themselves. I've never seen anyone pretend to be gay, right? You know what I mean? And I think it's so funny that is something that is a sort of a caricature or a stereotype that many folks have about folks who are questioning, which is silly because hello, I have been out since I was a junior in high school and I am still questioning a lot of things about my gender and sexuality, right? That stuff, I don't think it necessarily goes away. For some people it does, but for me, it went away for a while, and then I was oh, shoot. This is
my masculine training is falling apart.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, no.
As somebody who went to an all-women's undergrad school, I can tell you where that narrative comes from. And somebody who's experienced biphobia. Man, I've got 37 stories I need to tell you right now. And who has enacted it, you know what I mean? Who has been a gatekeeper of queerness in past lives. I think it for me, what I've witnessed is like this idea that like, oh, they're being a tourist into this lifestyle, or they're just seeking this relationship, but they're going to go off and marry a dude or whatever.
Sure.
And that all just comes from wounding and gatekeeping. That all comes from the idea of our obsession with binary, that like, oh, you have to be one or the other forever, or that like we could contain all of our sexuality and our desire into one label, you know, or one lifestyle choice forever. It's just,
for sure,
it's absurd. I definitely have seen all of those things that you've said, but like, were they real?
Yeah, right.
Like, you know, I guess I would go back to what I said before, is that like, if you've ever, you know, thought that you yourself were like maybe not genuinely participating in queerness, or you felt self-conscious about like going to a heterosexual presenting relationship after a queer one, like all of your experiences are real. It was real when
it was real when those people in college were doing it, right? Like there was a narrative about it, but like who knows what was happening in their hearts, their body, right? Like we won't
we'll
know.
Never know.
Absolutely.
Yes, exactly.
Only they will know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about this question of like, will I one day just know if I'm non-binary or bi or queer? And maybe for sure, right?
Yeah, maybe.
You know, I think that like you know, I've been on this journey around gender for the past like year and a half, more than that to be clear, but like really intentionally thinking about gender for a while, and like I have sort of come to the realization that like non-binary is the word that fits best for me. But like when I wake up every day, am I like really certain that that's the thing that I am? Like, no, right? There's a lot of question marks that still exist in it. And some folks come out of the womb, you know, knowing immediately that they're trans, right? That they are not the gender that they, right? And it's like a whole spectrum of experience that some folks are really certain, and some folks continue to wonder and question and dig into it. And I think both of those experiences are really wonderful and should be, you know, appreciated in lots of different ways. So it may come that like a day happens and suddenly you're like, yeah, oh, this is the word that it works for me. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, in 5 years, you might look back and be like, wow, I don't actually think about this that much anymore. I just like kind of know it, which is great. Right. Or, you know, you might kind of be in a place where you're like, I'm not quite sure. And I'm going to explore and continue to redefine as I go along. Like all of those things are absolutely valid. So I wish I could give you an answer and be like, yes, someone will come down and touch you on the forehead and you will suddenly have all the clarity that you need. But in my experience, that's not what has happened. So if something does happen, I'll check back in and be like, just wait, the sky beam will come down and touch your forehead.
I feel I was thinking about the question, like, when did you know you were queer, and like, when did you come into that? And before we talk about like beginnings, I also want to say I want to do like an annoying self-referential podcast thing. And like maybe a month ago or 2 months ago on the Patreon episode, I had like a weird meltdown about like this woman I was attracted to at a music show. Do you remember that episode?
Yes, I do remember this. Yep.
And we talked about like sexuality and the presentation of sexuality and sexual agency and exploration and gender. And it was basically me just melting down because I could start to, you know, like, I'm queer. I'm comfortable with my queerness. I'm comfortable with my sexuality. But even now, you know, 5 years into my queer marriage and at 37, I had a new revelation, and I could start to like peek under the conditioning that I had as a child to view all of this untapped gender and untapped sexuality that I had sort of denied from myself because of our heteronormative culture, basically. And so before we talk about like our queer beginnings, I have to say like my queerness is probably always going to be evolving and untapped, like not fully tapped into. Do you know what I mean? Because I will be, I will be in that constant practice of unlearning our conditionings and learning myself, exploring, giving myself permission, and my relationship is going to adjust with that. Like, we won't know what it will look like, or what it will be open to. If you could listen to that episode.
The meltdown.
What I liked about it is that it was basically like 45 minutes of you and I, as secure queer people, exploring even deeper what the depths of that queerness and identity and gender for me particularly, especially, and like my bodily presentation as a secure or a confident cisgendered femme woman, you know what I mean? Sort of realizing what that sort of conditioning had done to me as well. So
For sure.
shout out to that episode.
It's a great episode.
So tell me about your queer beginnings. I know we've talked about this before on the show, but we haven't in a while. So like when did you start? Do you remember when you learned the word gay or like what gayness was?
I do, and it's sad because it's Matthew Shepard.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's when I realized that there were people who were like attracted to the same gender out there, right? Like I knew that I could be attracted to men, right? Because like, I played like 90s Dream Phone and was like, oh, I have favorites of these pictures of these boys, right? Like I was like, I want to call this one specifically, right? And I remember it being like off limits, right? So I thought that there was nothing available there and that I was like weird or like something bad was happening. And then Matthew Shepard died, right? Was murdered for being gay. And that's when I was like, gay people? What is this thing that's happening?
Yeah. Do you remember it being explained to you by your parents or like
I
by
remember
the
it being
news?
explained to me in school because I was in 4th grade and I was part of the morning news announcements, right? We had like a little like morning TV show that would play. And we would like talk about news stories that were happening and how we would talk about them. And that was one that came up and my teacher had to explain to me like what, I don't think we talked about it on the news because she was like, that's too heavy for 1st graders. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. But I remember that was the moment where I was like, oh, this person was like a boy attracted to other boys. Yeah. And this person got murdered because of it. Right.
Yeah,
like these were like the immediate connections that were like made in my 4th or 5th grade brain. Yeah. So that was when I like knew that gay people existed. I knew for a long time that I was like attracted to other boys. Like I like not necessarily sexually, but like definitely like spiritually, romantically, like really wanted to be with them. And then came out when I was a junior in high school and then was like out for a long time. And used the word gay and like probably wouldn't have used the word queer until I think I got more involved in like queer spaces and then was like, oh, this feels better than just like gay.
Yeah. We should find that teacher that explained that to you. Yeah. And be like,
I think it was
job.
Miss Tully. So Miss Tully, if you're listening, thank you for supporting us on Patreon.
Yeah. So for me, I had a queer aunt who honestly, shout out to this aunt, has been unapologetically unlabeled her whole life. Like she doesn't use the word gay or bisexual, but has like since in my 37 years of knowing her, has been married to a man, partnered to a woman for like 15 years, dated multiple other men, dated multiple other, like these people have all been in my lives. And And only recently, in the last maybe 5 years, did I ask her, like, so are you bisexual? And she was like, no, I'm just like, whatever.
I love it.
Yeah. And I think she said that was like part of her generation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not necessarily like hippie free love, but not having the language or the urgency for labels like we do, which I think is a double-edged sword, you know.
For sure.
I think labels are a good thing ultimately. And also I find something really liberating about her just being like, I'm a body looking for another body and a
For
person
sure.
in that body, you know?
Yep.
So I had a queer aunt who, like in my early memories was with that husband. They divorced, and then she got with this other woman who was my aunt for, you know, over a decade. And so that was like in my mind. And I think it was like always, you know, but then my eldest sister came out to me when I was 12. And then later that year, Matthew Shepard died. So funny how that was like such a marker in our childhood. I like never knew that was that tipping point for you, or like that educating moment.
I gotta tell you, I do this exercise a lot in my like other job where we talk about like when was the first time you became aware of like queer people, and it's either AIDS or Matthew Shepard. Those are like the two answers that people give. Yeah. Yeah. Or they have like like you said, like an aunt or like a cousin or something that came out. Yep.
And I know it's that order because even though Matthew Shepard wasn't my first introduction to queerness, it similarly was tied with my sister coming out and me meeting, because I think she came out in September because it was in like a college year. And then Matthew Shepard was murdered in October. And this is like, I know this is a heavy way to talk about queerness, but it is also part of our lineage. And I do believe that, you know, what a huge and irrevocable sacrifice, you know, not even a sacrifice, because it was given unwillingly, you know,
Absolutely.
Matthew's life taken. And it was the instigator of not just the national awareness of queer people, at least for our generation and the generation surrounding, but his murder was like the tipping point for so many for hate crimes being like officially established as hate crimes, you know, versus just acts of violence. So anyway, you know, we owe a lot to him in that unwilling sacrifice. I can't think of a better word because it's not a sacrifice. He didn't.
Yep.
That wasn't his choice. Anyway, Matthew, we love you. We love you. Yeah. So queer journey. In terms of questioning, you came out at 17. I remember telling my high school friends, close friends. Like I told my very first boyfriend that I had a crush on this girl, Caitlin.
Mm-hmm. Caitlin, if you're listening, you're beautiful.
She is really beautiful. Honestly, she reminds me of my wife. Like, you know, I got to type. And she, like a month later, my ex-boyfriend started dating her. I know.
Oh, the trials and tribulations of high school.
I know, when he knew that. Yeah, and then I went to college and had that experience. You want to know something really funny? When we're talking, I can't believe this is what we're talking about, because I just got this. I just sort of had this connection made for me today. This is going to seem out of the blue, but here we go. It speaks to my queer journey. So I dated like Willow and a couple other queer people between 18 and 20 21-ish, let's say. And then I moved to Minneapolis after Willow and I broke up. And I think I had some like dalliances with queer people over the next couple of years, but I almost exclusively dated men or was in heterosexual relationships until like I was 29 maybe. And I had this sort of big year of self-exploration in the shape of like just a fucking blowing up my life in every different way. and just making terrible choices. And it made me have all these realizations and have all these repressed memories come up, you know. And that's when I started being like, wow, I need to look more. This is at 29 and 30, I think. I was like, I need to look more intimately at my heart, at my desires, at my history, at my patterns. Like, what am I doing that is actually authentic? And what am I doing in the name of people pleasing or seeking affirmation? And what have I denied myself for the past decade, basically, because I had been in like one long-term relationship with somebody who I really deeply loved, but was not sexually attracted to, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, fast forward to the present for just one moment. This random person from my past messaged me today, you know, asking if I lived in Albany because they apparently have family here, yada, yada. And we haven't spoken since like 2016. And so much so that I had to like scroll back through our messages to be like, who is this again? Okay. You know, yada, yada. So just like a friend from a different time. And they were asking, this is a fellow queer person, and they were like asking me, like, what's up with me? And I was like, man, I'm going through a crazy time. And I'm like exploring my sexuality. Kudos to them. They were like, really? It was basically like their response. I know, it was a bummer. If you're subscribed to this, thank you. And sorry, you responded so poorly. But then get this, they were like, so basically they were like, so tell me about it. And I'm reading the screenshot right now. It says, I said in 2016, over the past year, I've had some realizations and memories come up. And with that clarity, I looked more closely at my sex life, my relationship with my body, with other people, etc. And the last time I truly loved having sex and felt genuinely attracted to someone's body was my last girlfriend years ago. And guess who that fucking was?
Willow.
My wife. Cute. Wife's got receipts. I've got receipts for how obsessed I am with my spouse. And also to add this to the story of queerness, like, so if you're on the roller coaster right now, I'm only sharing this, honestly, dear letter writer, so that you feel less alone in your wavering journey. Because like Sam said, we all have this forever winding, unfolding journey of the self. So like I'm going through this, you know, revelation, I think around 2016, where I'm like, I think I'm super queer, and I've been denying myself of that. I was never like, oh, I never fully said I wasn't bisexual, but I wasn't really fostering that part of my life intentionally. And then just like a kick in the face, or like not a kick in the face, but just like proof of more lived experience, I went on that summer to like get with the dude who like broke up with me and who was like a hot mess and who was cheated on me, but who was great in the sack. So honestly, I was so grateful in terms of like my own self exploration, because at that time that I wrote that message, I was like, am I a lesbian? Because I haven't really had sex with men in a way that I found deeply, deeply pleasurable. It was just like okay, cool sort of way. You know what I mean? But that cheater was unfortunately great in the sack. But part of me appreciates that experience, because it was like, again, going back to literally the first thing I said to this letter writer, like, my lived experience is real. Yep. It's real that I had great sex with that person, and real that I really liked having sex with this other person. And it was real that you were in love, that I was in love with that woman, and real that I was in love with this man, and real that I was attracted to this non-binary person who I dated for a year in college. You know, like all of those things were real.
Yep.
You're a real person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that like in my experience around gender, right, when I gave myself the permission to not think like, oh, you're a gay man, like that's all that you have, and like your experiences are tied to your gayness. It wasn't until I was like, I don't have to think that way, that I would look back and be like, oh,
of course you're non-binary.
There are
of course.
so many different instances that I can think of where it was like, where I was so deeply uncomfortable with the gender that people were giving me. And I was like, oh, this is just a common experience that people have.
Yes.
Turns out it's not. And like from talking to other people in my life about it, being like, no, I don't. I definitely felt weird, like different from other men because of the fact that I was gay, but I never like, it didn't like impact me in the way that it sounds like it was impacting you. And like, these types of conversations were none that I had. And those experiences that I did have, I just dismissed as being like unimportant, right? Or like common, or like not trying to tell me something about myself.
Yes.
And I'm so glad for you, letter writer, that at 24, you're sort of thinking about this in a meaningful way, because I wish I had the frame of mind when I was younger to really think more critically about gender and to ask myself these important questions about like, what is it for me? What does it mean? As opposed to just like trusting what other people had assigned to me or told me it was exactly right. Right. Like I think I speak to about that, or a lot of letter writers speak to this too. It feels like I missed out on years of being like, oh, I could have been like more comfortable for like the last 20 years or whatever. Yeah. But it just didn't feel available to me. So I know that this questioning piece is really challenging, and like, I'm in it with you for sure. And like, what a wonderful thing for you to be already at such a young age figuring out like, cool, this isn't working for me, and I want to figure out something different.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you know what it sounds like? You and I both had to be like less closed-minded about ourselves. I had to stop being biphobic to myself in order to be like, oh, the entirety of my sexuality is real and it happened and I'm valid. And you were like, the entirety of my gender expression and my relationship with my gender is real. You know what I mean? Like, this is like, we just need to validate ourselves. That sounds like so cheap, but it's so true. And like I've said multiple times before on here, similar to you, once I stopped demanding myself to be anything but what I was, is when I finally felt really comfortable with saying, oh, I'm queer and this is how I express myself. And this is, you know, my identity is valid and intuitive and natural, just as it is.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. And it exists without labels as well, right? Like labels are such a helpful thing for us to figure out who we are and to find community. And I love that. And finding the right label doesn't make or break your identity, right? Your identity is what it is going to be, whether or not you have the exact right word for it. So it's okay to be searching for that term, but also know that finding the right term doesn't mean you are any more or less valid than you were before you found that exact right word.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, my darling, I hope that this helps. I hope I hope that made any sense. I feel like I just was like, and then I fucked that person. And
yeah,
then,
no, I really, I knew this was going to be sort of an exploration of a lot of different things and experiences for both of us. That is what I called
my 20s, which is essentially like, you know, a shaming, you know, all of it is exploration, right?
For
when
sure.
people are like, oh my God, they're just like, what did they say? It's like a stage or...
Yep. Like a phase, or like they're just trying this out. Like, yeah, cool.
Literally, that's all we do. Okay. Anyway, happy Pride, everyone. And to our letter writer, we love you so much. We hope this makes you feel more self-assured. And if not more self-assured, more confident to continue this exploration that you will be on, hopefully for a lot longer.
Absolutely.
We love you.
Thank you so much for writing and for supporting us on Patreon.
All right, my darlings, thank you so much for supporting us on Patreon, for listening to our podcast. You know, we're coming up on our fifth anniversary, 5 years of podcasting.
That's wild.
Can you believe?
I love it.
Yeah. And honestly, the number one most surreal thing about this is that Sam still wants to talk to me.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
No.
The most surreal thing.
I'm curious what you're going to say now.
Yeah. The most surreal thing is that all of you want to listen. So we're still really so deeply connected to our gratitude for all of you, for the Just Break Up family that we have built. Our gratitude is still so close to the surface in our hearts. We love you all. Thank you for listening. And remember, you can be proud of who you are right now. You can be proud of what you went through to get here. All of the ways in which you have found out more about yourself along the way. Pride isn't just about 1 month or 1 day, or, it's not for those who have fully become themselves. Pride is about loving yourself along the journey, and we're proud of you. And if all else fails,
just break up.